quorum. Thank you for coming, and I also want to thank the city of Lytton for hosting this morning's legislative forum location. I'm Carroll. I'm a member of the legislative committee from the Carroll Chamber of Commerce. The format of today's program will include prepared questions for the legislators, and then there will be a time for questions from the floor. The forum will take approximately 1 hour. We're starting at slightly after 10. If you have questions that are not answered after this is over with, the legislators, I think, will spend a few moments at least to attempt to answer those questions or discuss with you afterward. So at this time, we want to thank Representative Brian Best, who's in his backyard or front yard, whatever we want to call it here.
Front yard.
Front yard, good. And Senator Segabar. And with that, we will begin with the first item that we have on our agenda, opening comments from the legislators.
Sure. Well, welcome everyone. Kind of a flying trip up here from Audubon. I was right on Brian's tail the whole way. Thought I'd get lost over here. I don't go through Willie quite often enough, I guess. Things were good in Willie. What's been going on this last week? Well, we're in the middle period between the first funnel and the second funnel. Next week, the second funnel comes up, which means that the bills that have been sent to the Senate from the House after the first funnel need to go through the voting process that mirrors the first funnel to stay alive for the rest of the legislative session. Unless they're a spending bill, then or they're in Ways and Means, and then those bills are always up for debate, even they're not subject to a funnel. Okay, so we've done a lot of bills here in the last couple of weeks. I think we did 40-some 2 weeks ago since the last time we talked, and we did another 30 the next week. So I think we're 70 to 80 bills that we've been working on since we got past the first funnel. So there's been a lot of action there in the Capitol for the last couple of weeks. This week, one of the bills that I found kind of interesting that's nobody's really ever heard about before is the thing called the growler. You ever heard of a growler? It's not what you think. It's not school board members, by the way. Growlers are just a vehicle that you can, there are a lot of breweries, Iowa breweries now, and a growler is a vessel you can put brewery beer in and take home with you if you want to take it home. And it's about 64 to 72 ounces, I believe, and it's of such a thing that they can actually seal it after they put it in your growler. It can be sealed so it wouldn't be an open container in your vehicle, and it can be sold either in at the breweries. They often have places called tap rooms, which is like going to a bar, and you can get your growler filled there, or you can get it at a convenience store. This also allows it to be done at a convenience store, and so that passed unanimously, and that was kind of interesting. It's kind of a new, the convenience stores that I talked to yesterday were kind of interested in that. It's a new venue for them, but we also passed a radon testing bill last week that allows agencies that test new homes to release the findings to the new homeowners after the home has been sold. So that was sort of something that hadn't been done in the past. The new homes are required to have radon mitigation built right into them in the Iowa code. We passed that bill a year ago, so that was the only radon bill I think that made it through this year. I guess the most interesting bill was the transportation bill we passed this week. It was really supposed to be just a technical bill that dealt with it dealt with changing and making recommendations to the Department of the Commission, the DOT Commission. It just assigned duties and the role of the commission. And but the interesting part to me was the fact that they changed some of the licensing procedures in the state, and the one that struck me the most was that they're going to allow work permits. If you've had your license revoked, you can get a work permit and drive on that, which would allow you to go to work, or if you're driving professionally, it allows you to work, and otherwise, you might be out of a job if you lost your license, and so I thought that was very significant, so. Those are some of the things, and there was also a bill from the House on removing liability for municipalities. And this liability would be if you were allowed sledding in your local parks and skateboarding and that sort of stuff. This bill actually would limit your liability, and in fact, remove your liability, so city parks are immune to liability now because of this bill. So, and it had already passed through the House, so I think it's probably ready for the governor at this point, so.
Yeah, I think the reason for that was, a lot of communities were afraid to let kids even sled, you know, and because there was lawsuits, and it kind of got to a point where you couldn't do anything. So I think that's a good bill. Yeah.
That's pretty, that's not everything that went on, but I thought those are some of the more interesting sort of sidelight deals that have been on this last week. The water quality issue is still, it's actually, the way I understand it, of course, the lawsuit was filed 2 weeks ago by the Des Moines Waterway Works against the three counties actually, Buena Vista and Sac and Calhoun, over nitrates coming from drainage districts. The lawsuit was filed, and there were some responses from legislators up in that area that mentioned the fact that maybe they should boycott Des Moines for doing this, and I don't agree with that. I think this is a problem we need to stay united on, and to boycott Des Moines is only divisive, so clean water is all our problem. So from what I've been hearing, now I'm getting the pipeline. There's lots of issues this year that, let me talk about the pipeline, the Dakota Access Pipeline that's coming down, and it's not actually going through Carroll, but it's just kind of skirting around the northern part of Carroll. They have about 20, they're claiming they have about 25% of the landowners signed up on this issue. And they have filed their petition to the Iowa Utilities Board. But at this point, there's very little incentive for the Utilities Board to take it up. They haven't set a date for a hearing on that, and there's a lot of questions out there by most of the landowners on whether this is a good deal or not, and what their liability is going to be, and what the Dakota Access Pipeline's liability is going to be. So those are all big issues, and I don't know how this is going to turn out in the end, but we're going to, for me, I'm going to protect the landowner as much as I can if it's a legislative issue. So those are some of the big deals going on, and there's more than that, and Brian can talk about those.
Okay. One of the more interesting things for me this week is I'm on a subcommittee, which is a 3-person committee that's going to be working on oversight for Health and Human Services, and with managed care, which is it's a new concept that Iowa is putting into place. Basically, it'll affect mental health. It'll affect pretty much anybody who gets Medicaid or is on Medicaid. The whole idea behind managed care is just to create efficiency so there's not duplications. Having a company oversee those things that will hopefully cut cost. And managed care organizations are private organizations, and there's probably going to be 2 to 4 managed care organizations which will basically take over Medicaid. And Medicaid is it's a huge amount of dollars. I believe Iowa's portion of Medicaid is about $1.7 billion, somewhere around there. And so being on the subcommittee for oversight is very interesting, and I think very important, because what we want to make sure we do is that folks that are on Medicaid still have access to care, that the care is still of quality, and to make sure that these companies do it right. Because private companies in this situation obviously want to make profits, and so we just want to make sure that that they're doing it right, they're treating everybody fairly, and that there is access to the services that are needed. So that's one of the committees or the subcommittee that I'm on, and I look for something to pass very soon in that area. There's the Senate file came over, and we'll be making some amendments to that, and that will, I'm sure, get to the governor's desk. If you've been reading my emails that I send out weekly, I will touch a little bit on the fact that I did get to manage 2 bills, which is it's a very important process in becoming a legislator. When you're a freshman, when you get to manage a couple bills, it's really a good thing, because that gives you the ability to understand a bill from the very beginning. It's very concept. When it becomes a bill to when you actually manage it on the floor, then it passes. You're the manager through that whole process. A couple of bills that I managed were traffic cams. Anybody who, any municipality that wants to have a red light camera, and if they're gonna give you fines, they should tell you what that money is being used for. We actually do that if we get a ticket in a normal situation, and so cities like Cedar Rapids have really used traffic cams a lot, and they're collecting a lot of revenue from that. And so the whole idea behind that is that they need to be transparent, to tell you when you write the check to the municipality how that money is being used, just like the state has to do. Another one that I got to manage, and this is kind of interesting, if you have well, actually it's interesting to me, it may not be to you, but if you have a vehicle that's over 12 years old and is worth less than $1,000, you no longer have to have a registration if you're taking it to the junkyard, if you're just taking it for scrap. One of those things that you've had a vehicle sitting around for 15 years and you can't find the registration, it's going to make it a lot easier. And another thing that is connected to that bill is it does create a system where the serial number of that vehicle is reported into a federal data bank, and each state can get that NVI number and can report that, so that it creates less fraud and abuse as far as people going out and using fake and phony serial numbers on their vehicle. Another thing that I'm kind of interested to see, gauge the feeling of the folks in this room is, if anybody has a comment on it, is I'm also on a subcommittee that deals with license plates in Iowa. And there's a bit of a movement now to only have one plate, and that just being the back plate, and getting rid of the front plate. The reason that there's a push for that is because there's a lot of vehicles that are being manufactured now that don't even have a place for the front plate, unless you want to drill a hole through the fiberglass of your front bumper. And that's been an ongoing complaint that we've been hearing a lot of. So there's interest in taking that up and possibly eliminating the front plate. It also will have a fiscal note that will help actually save the state a little bit of money. Obviously, you have half as many plates as you did before. So it's an interesting concept. I think 19 states have done that, and so we're kind of looking at that as a possibility too. With that, I guess we can move on, Joe.
Okay, I think you've pretty much progressed through the second one. As I understand it, when I was reading on the online site, that your second funnel week actually passed and it's been extended. Is that true?
I always thought it was April 3rd.
Okay. Okay, maybe I misread it. Okay, so, because we had the question here that we thought that the second funnel had passed, but it apparently has not passed. Okay. We'll move down then to 3. What is the effect of the last report of the Revenue Estimating Conference on the state budget?
Well, actually, the Revenue Estimating Conference meets 3 times a year, and I think it's in September and December and March. And the December conference is the one that the governor sets the state's budget off of. And the unless the conference that meets in March lowers the estimate of what they think the revenue is going to be. Well, that conference met last Thursday or Friday, and they dropped it a little bit, but really not enough to change the results. So the budget, the governor's budget is going to be the one that's going to stick. Doesn't necessarily mean the governor's budget is going to get passed just the way he recommended. That never happens, so I think we're safe to say that. So, but it did drop about $110 million, $90 million of which comes from just coupling our state income tax with federal income tax, which gave more breaks, tax breaks in the federal than it did in the state. So some of that was sort of built in and was a known amount to begin with. But it did come out, it turns out about $20 million less than what was predicted before. So we thought we had $200 million of new money. We only have $180 million of new money, which doesn't help the budgeting process in Iowa at all. And you know, the budget is really going to be tight this year, and our staff tells us that $966 million surplus that we did have a year ago, at the end of this next fiscal year, if things don't change, we'll be down to $250 million. That's my understanding of the revenue estimating conference. Got more comments?
Just simply stated, I guess the effect is that we've got a little bit less to work with, and we just got to tighten the belts just that much more.
What is the status of EMS emergency medical services through 9/11 or 9/11 funding?
You want me to start with this one?
Go ahead. I've got lots of notes. I could read here for an hour if you wanted me to give you the full stats.
Thank you, we appreciate you not doing that.
It's a little complicated for me. I'm learning a lot about this through folks that work in that area, and basically the way I understand it is that a lot of money that's been used over the last couple of years for the transmission of information from the police and ambulances and everybody like that in that county-wide system. A lot of money's been spent to upgrade, and now they're going through a new system again now, another upgrade. This is going to cost the local municipalities and local counties a lot of money. And so there's a couple bills that are on there's a Senate bill, which I think is better than the House bill, and Mark can touch on the numbers maybe. I don't have the numbers of the bills, but I believe that what they're doing is the way the House bill reads is it's going to cost the local taxpayers, the local entities, a lot of money, because what they want to do is they want to transfer a lot of that into the new system. And I understand the system that Carroll County has is working pretty well. I think they call that the PSAP, and that system was upgraded a while back, and to upgrade into a brand new system again basically antiquates everything you've got and all your radios and all this information, and the database that you've built is going to have to go to a new system, and it's going to cost a lot of money, and the state really isn't funding it at that funding for that. So it's kind of one of those things they want you to do, but they don't really have the money for you to do it. So I'm going to stick with the county on that one, that's for sure.
I'm scooping is what I'm doing. Here's the problem as I see it. 911 started, tell me the number, 20 years ago? And it was built on a system, to fund it was you got a bill, a surcharge on your phone, on your local phone. So what's happened to that, you know, a lot of people don't have a local landline anymore, and so that surcharge has been going down. And then we went from 911 to E911, which meant E stands for enhanced. Okay, and it was enhanced because now you had cell phones that you could get the ping off the cell tower. They could tell you where, and this would be for people that were that were either missing or as a locating beacon. So you could find people from this ping off that cell. So that was the first change, and now they have another term that they want to upgrade it to, what's it called? The new generation 911, NG 911. Because now you can get so much more information off your cell phone than you used to be able to. And some of these places went digital, and so this ability for the sheriff to talk to the fire chief at a fire or the state patrol has been lost. And so this new system, which is gonna be bigger and better, is what the state wants to move to. And in order to fund that, they wanna scoop that dollar that you had to your surcharge, that went into a trust fund. They wanna scoop that money out of there to help replace the radios in the state patrol and set up the system at the state level. So that means that the local services will get shorted. And here's just an example. This comes from the FEMA director in Crawford County. Their public safety access point, that's the local dispatcher that handles these calls, for Crawford County has an expense of $534,000 a year, and the surcharge that they received was $180,000, and it was going to go to $195,000. But those funds could all be non-existent if they scoop the funds out of that trust fund. So the two bills, as Brian was talking about, the House version is the governor's version, which scoops the money. And so I'm not in favor of that, but the Senate version doesn't do that. It's called Senate File 403, and that one would preserve the funding for the local PSAPs. And that's the one I would support, and that's the one I'm getting a lot of information about, especially from the Carroll County Jason Huffman, who is a dispatcher here locally, sent me a very excellent explanation of what's going on here. So it's yet to be determined how this will turn out, however.
I think we may have erred in our printing here. I think Emergency Management System is what EMS stands for. I don't believe it's Emergency Management Services. Would that be, does anyone?
It's services.
It's Emergency Management System, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, we are at the end of the formal questions being asked. I want to read a statement to you before we begin with the questions from the floor. If anyone from the floor has a question, please identify yourself, who you are, whom you represent, if it's something other than yourself. State your name and organization you represent. Please be sure that your question is relevant to a bill or issue that the legislators are able to act on. This is a time for questions, not a time to make a statement for lobbying purposes. If you have something that you would like to discuss without a question, we would request that you save it to speak with the legislators after the forum or contact them at another time. So at this time, if you would raise your hand, be recognized, then you can stand up and state who you are and whom you represent and ask the question that relates to legislation. Marty?
Marty Danzer, and I currently am representing the Region 12 Board. And we were discussing, Brian, we were talking about the managed care rates last meeting we had a week ago Thursday. And right now, has there been any discussion on the new mileage rates under the managed care organization? Currently, Region 12, the reason we have concern with this is because we charge by the loaded mile, and the rate that they're looking at is 57.5 cents. The rate that Region 12 charges for loaded miles is about $1.42. So even if you double that mileage rate, it will not make up for the difference. So has there been any discussion on that?
Not that I'm aware of. That's something I definitely would be interested in taking back. So give me those numbers again, would you please?
Region 12 charges $1.42 a loaded mile.
Okay.
And the new rate that they're discussing is 57, which is the federal rate.
I'll get back to you.
Okay, thanks, Brian.
Yep.
Next question? Go ahead, ma'am.
My name's Pat Hanna. I'm on the Board of Directors of New Hope Village. Thank you, Brian, for serving on this oversight committee in regards to managed care. And I understand that the managed care organizations will be accountable to the state in terms of saving money and efficiency and access of care. I'm also concerned about an appeals process for example, if a managed care organization denies to cover or pay for something, will there be an appeal process beyond just an appeal to the insurance company? I would like to see, people who receive Medicaid services be able to appeal somehow to the oversight committee or legislators, so that there's somebody besides the insurance company.
Yes, it's very important, I agree with you on that.
That's being worked on?
Yeah,
Oh.
it is. The Senate bill came over to us, and we are working on some things to make sure that, I mean, I would definitely want that in there, absolutely. An independent appeals process that isn't just going through the managed care company.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay,
yes.
thank you very much.
Yeah.
And what happened in the Senate, there's actually two oversight committees that have come through the Senate now. The first one is the oversight committee of what the plan is on how to get to managed care.
Right.
That just passed the Senate, and as I've been telling everybody, when I say it passed here, doesn't necessarily mean, the governor has to sign all this stuff before it happens, so.
Right.
Sometimes there's confusion. Well, you said it was gonna pass, and you think it passed, but all it might have done is passed out of your committee or passed out of your House or Senate. And it still has to go through the other house in the Capitol, and it has to get signed by the governor before it becomes a law. And you can get yourself in a real bind if you, legislators like to brag about the things they passed, only they only passed them in one house, so it really didn't change the law. And if you're assuming that it changed the law, you got to double check before you really rely on it. So the governor has to sign it, or it doesn't change a thing. So the two oversight committees is a good thing. I voted in favor of both of those because there's a lot of questions on how this change to managed care is going to affect everybody. And I spent yesterday morning visiting with the staff at Wesco Industries in Denison, which is sheltered workshop, and there's a big push to eliminate sheltered workshop type activities. And they're fearing for their jobs. So I'm very sympathetic to that as well. And one of the things, and I talked with Chuck Palmer, he's up for reappointment. Because the governor was reelected, all his appointments have to be re-approved by the Senate. And I talked with him the other day. He was in there working the Senate because he needs to get at least 60 votes, or 60% of the votes to get reappointed. I asked him, what's the criteria for managed care? When you go to check all these applications, these that are coming in, what's going to be the criteria? Is it going to go to the lowest bidder? Well, that's our fear, but
Yes.
no, not necessarily. One of the things they were going to look for to see how well they had already been out. They're evidently already out there working to sign up providers that would be in their list of providers that they would do business with. And he said one of the significant things would be to see how far they have already gotten with that, so they're really ready to take over when July 1 comes. So, so there's, and the oversight part comes, to answer your question, comes from that second oversight board that will be a complaint, a place that you can appeal to.
Right.
If you have something that you're having a problem with your MCO, which, like you said, there's probably going to be 4 different ones. And the reason there's 4 different ones is because then you have a choice to pick which one you want, is what I was understanding. I have a whole handout here, if you want to come up later. It's called Medicaid Modernization, Request for Proposal Fact Sheet. And it answers a lot of questions that you might have.
Okay, good.
And Chuck Palmer did say that they had one of their meetings, their informational meetings out there that was just for bidders for the MCO, and they had 667 questions, he said, just on the RFP themselves. So
Right.
is it clear? About as clear as mud, the way
Yeah.
it sounds to me. So,
Thank you, Mark.
thank you.
Next question, please.
Jean Ludwig, I'm just representing myself as a taxpayer. I'm concerned that people who are needing the services get them, but I've been in the medical services arena, and I've seen a lot of abuse of the Medicaid problem. And so my question is, what oversight is being done for us as taxpayers to prevent people playing the system and using it who should be working?
An asset verification bill did just pass the House. I don't know where it's gotten in the Senate, but that is one thing that I think is very good. And what it does is it actually brings on a contracted vendor who will make sure that when somebody comes in and applies for Medicaid, that they actually can track their assets in a very quick manner. So apparently what's been done in the past is if somebody came in and applied, a lot of times they would just assume that you're telling the truth, and then maybe in a month they find out that you weren't. Yeah, so then the state has to chase their money because they've already paid out some benefits that shouldn't have been paid out. And so this asset verification, we believe will be a good first step in making sure we root out fraud and abuse. That's one thing that's being done.
What about the medical part?
Well, that would include Medicaid.
No, I meant, what about the medical part? Assets are one thing, but their medical condition or their lack thereof is another issue.
Yeah. Now that part, that bill did not address that. It kind of, I think, is addressing a few issues like nursing homes, to make sure that if you go in a nursing home, that you truly do need the help that the state would be providing, and along with medical care and things like that too.
Your issue is very important, however. There was a consulting firm in Human Resources that was telling us about the fraud and abuse that had occurred in Chicago, of all places, where the managed care organization actually had 8,000 people still listed in their Medicaid files that they were getting paid for that were dead. I guess that doesn't surprise anybody. But you see, that's where the oversight really needs to come in and really verify that because you see, managed care gets paid by the person in their membership list. So if they have 40,000 Medicaid patients, they get a check cut to them every month to provide service for that 40,000. If 8,000 of them are dead, I guess maybe you can make a little money doing that, I suppose. But that's where fraud and abuse really comes in. So it's an important issue to stay on top of. So.
This lady has been anxiously waiting.
I'm Pam Jarvis from Templeton, and I'm just representing myself, but I'm an advocate for those with persistent mental illness, and I'm gravely concerned about the closure of the 2 MHIs in southern Iowa. And I just saw in the Carroll paper yesterday that they are now starting to transition some of those patients from Clarinda into it said private nursing homes, which are not really equipped to handle psychiatric patients. I'm a nurse as well. What, if anything, I'm concerned about how this kind of happened, that the governor's budget just cut funding without really going to the legislature. What can the legislature do, if anything, about the issue? I know you're both on human services committees. So.
I've heard that question many times, and frankly, the legislature's quite irritated that we were left out of the curve just like everybody else was, and there's been a lot of bills that are trying to band-aid the situation. One of them being that oversight committee that's going to oversee the transition, just to make sure that the closing of Clarinda or Mount Pleasant doesn't have the effect that we all fear that it will, which you're taking away a provider that one of the, in fact, I sent a note to the governor telling him that, both those places could be places the MCO is going to want to contract with later, or the regions as we go along, and to just shut those down, because if you take patients away, you got staff there that you can't pay any longer, and so your staff leaves, and now when it comes July 1, you're literally gutted, and the facility in Clarinda is more than adequate to do what they're doing there. And they have great staff members there as well, and
That
I
are
was.
trained in psychiatric care.
And as you say, the alternative here is nursing homes, which aren't really designed for this, unless they can figure out how to set up staffing to handle it. I don't know if they know that or even want that at this point. So we've been doing all the things to slow this down as much as possible. We've had lots of bills, which are commonly called fig leaf bills, just things that kind of make the process as difficult so you can't just turn the switch and do this. So that's about as much as we've been able to do other than complain and write letters to the governor over the issue, so.
A couple of bills at the House, well, one bill at the House passed would allow for out-of-state services to be used. And that, I think, is probably a good bill. I voted for that. And what that'll do is if you don't have in-state capability, you can at least try to find something out-of-state to help with that issue. But I think it goes way, I mean, that's, like you said, that's a Band-Aid bill, because it really is, I think the belief and the vision is that everything is gonna be community-based. And that's the vision.
Yeah, but it's not there.
It's not there, and it's gonna take a long time for that infrastructure. And so that is definitely a concern. I mean, maybe 20 years from now, or maybe 5 years from now, home base would be a good thing. But the one thing that home base does, and they talk about the Olmstead Act, which was a number of years ago when the Supreme Court said that everybody should be able to be in the community if they want to be. The danger of that is when Big Brother decides that everybody should be in the community if they want to be. Well, what if they don't want to be? What if you have somebody that's in New Hope Village that really wants to stay in that support system that they have in an ICF cottage? And so this is just something that sometimes the train left the station, and now we got to figure out how to slow the train down a little bit so we can get the infrastructure and support that needs to be there. So I agree with what you're saying. We're just gonna do the best job we can, because I don't see that, I don't see any delay. I don't see it, they're not really willing, I don't believe, unless you know something, Mark. The shutdown is gonna take place, I'm afraid, and on the date that they stated, so, which I believe is June 1st?
Yeah,
July 1?
July, the RFP awards published on July 31st, 2015.
But I was talking about the shutdown of the two MHIs, the complete shutdown.
Okay, Neil?
Just a statement, so it's a little bit out of place, but
Please.
I'm Neil Bachman, I'm a member of the Rolling Hills Mental Health Board, and currently we're working on establishing a community stabilization center and also a transition center, which will partly solve some of those issues. We're in the process right now of looking at 2 proposals to do this. And it's not a total solution to this issue, but it's a partial solution. So there's not a question, I'll sit down, but if you want to talk to me after the meeting, I'm available. Thank you.
Thank you. Question? Rob?
Rob Corliss, Carroll Community Schools. 2 quick questions. Senator, I noticed you didn't support Senate File 477 on extending the penny, and I'd like to have an explanation on that. And then, Brian, you mentioned about tightening the belts of the state government. Help me understand why we're given $520 million in tax breaks if that's the case.
On the tax break issue, for those of you that are not aware, I believe it's Tom Sands was the person who was introducing an option to go to a flat tax that would cut down, it would give somebody the option of using whichever system works best for them, itemizing or flat tax. And in that case, they believe that it's gonna save taxpayers probably about $500 million, I believe, the first year, and then it'll be in the $400 million range thereafter. One thing I will say is, I think we've talked about this a little bit before, Rob, I believe that these things do take a lot of time, and I think something like this is just being sent out as a kind of running up the flagpole, see what happens, but it's gonna take, I'm sure it's gonna take 6 to 8 years, which I don't think is gonna have a big effect on what we're doing right now. So that's what I'll say about that issue.
And my comment on that issue is, it goes back to my comments a minute ago about it's gotta be signed by the governor. And after what we've said about the governor, I don't, he might sign that, but it's gotta get passed, it's gotta be voted on. Literally, it's gotta be voted on 6 times before it can become a law.
I don't think it's in the Senate right now.
No, I don't think it would even come up in the Senate right now.
No.
So that's where that is. And you're asking about my vote on this local option sales tax for schools. I've always had the opinion, when the local option sales tax first came out, it was sold as you had to vote it in. The taxpayers had the opportunity to vote for this, whether they wanted to include it. And in this case, this bill was going to extend that sunset date by another 20 years and almost eliminate the ability for people to vote on that issue. And that was, since that was being taken out, that's how I couldn't vote for it.
Other questions?
Yeah, Chuck Dykstra, Western Iowa Networks. I want to go back to your 911, the funding on the EMS. One of my concerns is with some of the discussions about changing out systems at the PSAPs. The Carroll County PSAP just did an upgrade, I think it was 18 to 24 months ago. That could be now obsolete, and that's a pretty significant upgrade. Is the committee that's working on behalf of the state to move the 911 to enhance, further enhance the systems for texting and those types of things, are they working with the national organizations? Are they building a strategic plan? Because there is a network called FirstNet, and FirstNet is a national organization, and President Obama said he wanted to have one network nationwide that all these PSAPs, the local communities, all the emergency services could all connect to, and they would have a seamless nationwide network that they could transmit all their information extremely quickly, and they would have updated databases real time. So if there's not some forward-looking committee rolling out a strategic plan, I can just see the county continually having to sink money into something that's gonna be stranded, and only to have a, you know, they're not keeping up with technology, because, you know, the E911 was to allow for more detailed information to be delivered to the PSAP from the local provider. The wireless carriers aren't under those same restrictions as the landline guys. So if they're not putting those same restrictions and guidelines on the wireless companies, and 60 to 70% of the data that's being delivered to the PSAPs is coming from the wireless side, what's the point? What are we doing here? We're spinning our wheels and spending a lot of money, and I just assume give the money to the schools and let them do what they want, so.
I had the same feeling that you do on this. It just seems like this radio 911 problem is just, we're jumping from one spot to the next, and we just get one system up and we're required to change it to a different system. And we can't keep up with that. You just can't, it's like trying to keep your software up to date. You just can't do it. So, do we have somebody that's really getting involved with it? I'm not on the Commerce Commission where I suppose this is at, or the Commerce Committee, but I don't think so.
I mean, they do have a 911,
It just
they have a
appears like
911
it's-
board, I believe, and I know we've got representation from our industry that sits on that board, so I don't know.
Other than that board would probably be overseeing it, so. But again, you have to be technically savvy on this.
That's where I think you need to be careful voting on these bills that may appear to be good, but the devil's in the details, and looking long-term, maybe a short-term Band-Aid, but looking long-term, it's gonna cost everybody a lot of money, and then we're just gonna roll it to the curb and put the next box in that'll do whatever they want us to do.
Done with comments on that one?
No.
Okay, good. Other questions? Please, Charlie?
I'm Charlie Nixon from Coon Rapids.
Speak up, Charlie, so we can all hear.
I'm Charlie Nixon from Coon Rapids, and perhaps you recall our conversation earlier about school finance and how you might be able to, or the need to move transportation costs from the general budget over to infrastructure costs. And I was wondering if there's been any effort, either on your part or anybody else, to do that in order to school districts.
Yeah, Charlie, I know in the House right now, there's interest in, let me see here. working with Pepple Flexibility to allow repairs and things like that to be done, which makes sense. Opening up dropout and at risk and let those be cross-utilized. That's another thing that they're working on. I think those are probably being seriously considered by the leadership and the education committee, so I think those might have a shot. And I would definitely support those things. Also, there was a gentleman, Representative Gassman has been trying to get something through where you get up to 3% additional per pupil if you're in a district that has high transportation costs. So that might help a little bit. Those are some of the things that we're working on. Personally, I think anything we can do to give more flexibility to school boards and administrations makes sense. And I hope that our leadership will kind of take another look at that, because I know that the categories really cause a lot of angst. It's kind of ridiculous when you've got millions of dollars sitting here and you can't touch it. And I'd be for more flexibility in those areas, for sure.
The Senate passed the Pepple flexibility bill.
Would you explain what the Pepple is, because a lot of people may not know?
Well, thank you.
Rob could probably.
Don't be Brian.
Pepple is really a silo fund that will buy infrastructure. Is that correct? I'm pretty sure that's correct. And it would buy a new school bus, but it wouldn't allow you to fix the engine if it blew up with the same funding. So what this bill does is allow flexibility in the Pepple fund to go ahead and fix that engine in that school bus, and it's a good first step. It should be, there's probably more that we can do.
Well, if you could move all transportation costs.
Yes, because that's the other issue. You're really not talking about Pepple funds, but you're talking about the difference in transportation costs for rural districts that have to haul children much farther. And when you do that, you burn up your money hauling kids rather than teaching kids. And so if we could get that done, I'd be happy camper.
All the more reason to extend the penny.
Okay,
If you let them vote on it, go ahead.
That's left the barn.
okay,
The
let's,
state took over that already. They extended
other
the state.
questions, please.
Lisa Danzer, taxpayer. Is there any forward-looking into the state and or federal creating a phone book for the cell phones as home phones become obsolete?
I don't know of anything in that area. No, it's interesting.
I think that we need to support and or have somebody forward-looking into creating that, because people are getting lost in the system.
I'm gonna get a lot more phone calls on your cell phone that you don't know where they're coming from now than ever before. Yeah.
But they can be regulated just like your home phones, and you do not call list.
Do you want everybody to have your cell phone number? I guess that's the question I would throw up here.
That's the question.
I think most of us want a cell phone, just so we've got our own private little connection, but.
On a forward-looking view, as home phones become obsolete, do we need to have that availability? As we look on the medical end, so your kid gets in an accident, and because of HIPAA, you need to have access to calling those people. How do you get it? One concern.
Questions? Seeing no questions, Jim?
Jim Gossett with Raccoon Valley Electric, and Brian, this week you voted on a safety bill, and it had an amendment to it to provide an outside disconnect for distributed generation of solar panels, maybe on a hog building or a roof. That outside disconnect was very important for our firemen, volunteer firemen out in the country and everywhere. They'll be able to throw that switch, disengage that system, make it safer to handle those emergencies, to say nothing of the linemen that need to work on the lines without the power coming back on them. So we thank you for that, and if it should happen to come back up or come up in the Senate, we encourage you to vote for that as well.
Let's hope it does, because that's the only way to change. Thanks.
Any other questions from the audience? Hubert?
Hubert Hageman. Chuck Palmer's name was mentioned a couple of different times, and as I understand it, his name has been sent to the Senate with no recommendations. Is that going to be a problem that maybe he won't be reappointed?
On the surface, you would think that maybe that would cause a problem, but, my take on the majority party vote in the Senate, is that Chuck Palmer is a known quantity that's done a pretty good job with a huge staff and budget for many years, and to change that right now is asking for trouble. If you don't appoint him, you're gonna have to go find somebody to lead us through this next year of great change. And so, just by the comments that were made in the committee, the comments were, we support moving the appointment along, but we want better communication in the future, because a lot of the argument is nobody knew that this wasn't gonna be a line item in the budget until we saw the budget. And I think that point has been made perfectly clear to Mr. Palmer and even to the governor. And I think he will get appointed. There are gonna be a few no votes on the majority side of the ticket, I'm sure, but I think he will get reappointed.
And that is a vote of only the Senate, right?
Yes, that's just the Senate votes.
Okay. We have time for one last question, if there's one that's on the,
On the issue of the Iowa caucuses and people having non-essential employees or emergency, or people that are not emergency personnel getting paid time off to participate in the caucuses to increase the turnout and so forth for both Democrats and Republicans. Do you have thoughts on whether employers should be mandated to provide time off for people who are, you know, who are the non-essential
There
people?
was actually a bill in the Senate
Yeah,
for
yeah.
that, and it passed on the majority in a party line vote, and I voted against it. I don't think they should be mandatory, given paid time off to go to the caucuses. I agree with Mark on that. I'd read something about it in the paper, but it hasn't really come up in the House. But I think it'd be kind of difficult for me to feel like I needed to dictate to a business if they have to give paid time off to do something like that. I think it's definitely a citizen's right, and I think if a citizen wants to go and do it, I would think that a business should give them that opportunity to do it, but I don't believe they should have to pay their wages.
That's a good point, I would agree with it. If they wanna go, they should have time to go, but being paid to go, is that another issue?
thank you, Senator Segelbach and Representative Brian Best. We appreciate you taking time today for this legislative forum. We again want to thank the host, Susan Danner, in the city of Glidden. One of the council members is here, and there's another one sitting there. There may be others that I'm not aware of, but thank you very much for hosting this event. And the legislative committee members, the rest of you that are here, would you please stand and be recognized at this time? So if you have questions or comments about the legislative forum process, please let one of us know. And we get together every 2 weeks and sit down and talk about the issues that we see that might be coming. We try to put those into the form of questions, which we started out with, and then we also appoint a moderator to work with managing the process of the questions. So thank you again very much for coming, and have a good pre-Easter week.